Sure, the system is all working. It's not reflecting. That's it. Perfect. Right, this is a bit of a personal odyssey for me. Archaeology in the Lake District is an interesting subject to try and pursue because there aren't that many archaeologists around to help me do it. And I started getting seriously involved with it back in the 1980s when I did a big landscape survey and excavation project in Kent in the Lake District, which got me highly motivated, partly because it's my home turf. I was born in Barrow, but I spent most of my waking life when I was a kid, dog walking and mountaineering, and roaming the hills with my parents, and then eventually going to university and doing the same kind of thing there. So it all sounds a bit kind of serious, this, doesn't it? And what a boring title. I'm so sorry about this. I hope you can find this lot. I'm just in the title indicates. Anyway, let's get going. So the story for me started about 12 years ago, and it grew from there through various conferences. This is a picture taken by a friend of mine who lives in Queensland, with me talking, can you believe it, about 7 years ago in Valcamonica, at the International Federation of Rock Art Organizations Congress. Now, if you can imagine this, people are fascinated by prehistoric general rock art, and that does not mean rock art depicting the Rolling Stones or Oasis or anything like that. It's stuff that's carved onto rocks in the past or painted into rocks. And it runs right through to the present. So to give you a perspective on it is almost impossible. It runs from remote prehistory right up to the present day. But there's a bunch of fanatics who every so often get together and talk about it. And this year we were in Valcamonica, and I was talking about my particular point of the field work that I was working on in the Central Fells and Lake District to them then, just to give you a perspective of where I'm coming from. And my perspective is all about today the Central Fells of this fantastic area. Now, this is a picture showing Patriarch, Harrison Stickle, and Piper Stickle, North Crane, snowy peaks in the background from Cock Tower. Anybody know Cock Tower in Landell? Yeah. Should do if you don't know it. Great bouldering on if you're a climber, but equally great if you're a prehistorian, because in the 1990s, a couple of amateurs, Paul and Barbara Brown, discovered panels of Neolithic rock art on one of these boulders. The boulder here with this ranging pole next to it. And this was phenomenal. I and literally hundreds of prehistorians have driven up and down this valley, heading for the axe factory sites, in inverted commas, axe factories, high in the fells, without even realizing that something like this was right next door to the road. And that is inspiration in a way, because it makes you think, if that's there, what else can be found? Because everything in the Lake District, as you all know, has been described in great detail already. But I didn't start my fieldwork in Landell. I decided to look in an area where nobody had looked before. Because I figured if people could find things in Landell that hadn't been found before, maybe I could get lucky and go and look somewhere else and find things that people haven't found before either. So, Upper Eskdale. Anybody know Upper Eskdale? Yeah, great. It's usually a place that you walk to get somewhere else. You might park at Cock and Bet, go up to Pike, come back down by Slight Side, drop down, maybe go down the Esk and then go back over by Hard Knock and over to Cock and Bet. So it's a place that people go through to get to other places. But it also contains some of the subjects of this afternoon's talk, because a lot of people assume that the stone that was used in creating stone axe blades thousands of years ago all came from basically one place, which is on many old maps, which is the Pike of Stickle in Landell. This is not the case. There are a number of different locations throughout about a 17-kilometre range of volcanic tuff that runs across the Central Falls, where people accessed stone in the past. And one of those major locations happened to be on the summit plateau. Let's see if I can get this to work. Of Scawfell Pike, basically near the summit of the highest mountain in England, which is quite mind-boggling thinking about it. So to just put it in perspective, you know this already, but this is where these two locations are. And we're going to run back just a bit to give you a bit of context before I start talking about the Scawfells, which is the area that I was particularly interested in at the time. Just to give you the context for how archaeologists came to understand these blade industry sites were actually there in the first place. So this is the top buttress of Pike Stickle, Harrison Stickle in the background there. Thanks to the random landside mountain, that's for this amazing picture. Back in the 19th century, people started to realise that stone axe blades were coming up in some numbers from agricultural activities around the fringes of the Lake District. A particularly important site was that at Enside Tarn on the west coast of Cumbria, where these wonderful blades, finished blades here, over a foot long, even a hatted example, were found. And you can still see these. They're in the British Museum in the glass case. If you want to go and have a look at them, there. They should be here, but they're not. Top buttress again. So people had an inkling that there might be production sites for some of these blades in the core of the Lake District where there was extremely fine volcanic stone available for this kind of thing. But nobody knew where these were until, let's say, the 1940s. Now, the Armit have got an amazing collection of books, which you should all come and study, but one in particular, this one, Studies of Northern Prehistory, Essays in Memory of Claire Fell. Claire Fell was a demon of an archaeologist, demoness of an archaeologist, who I'm lucky to have met and pointing her life. She basically single-handedly looked after the prehistory of the Lake District and Cumbria for most of her life. And it was Claire, who was a graduate from Cambridge, who, together with an architect called Brian Bunch, it's all described in this book, discovered that there were flaking sites on the moor, the Tour Stake Pass State Moor, at the back of Pike Stickle here, top buttress. And then Brian Bunch found that there were flakes all down South Screen, which is this here on the right of the picture. And they gradually realised, having done some fieldwork in the 1940s and published it, that this area of the mountain had huge quarry sites with vast amounts of debris from the Lake District spilling down to the bottom of the mountain. But you can see some of it in this great picture by my friend William Tarver just there. So that's South Screen a few years ago. Anybody actually been there? So you know it, right? Horrible screen run. And you can see also where the grass used to be before it turned into a screen run on the sides of the mountain. So an enormous amount of running activity has moved, literally shifted this entire scree slope along with erosion and climate change and all the rest of it down towards the valley. A lot of people, by the way, think that the cave here, halfway down the screws, is an artificial cave. It's not. It's natural, but things have been found in it. So that's that. And then on the face of the mountain, as I said, once you scramble around from South Scree, you get to the actual quarries where the blades were created about 1,000 years ago. And you stand on the debris of this enormous industry in inverted commas. And that is an example of some of the rock that was either fire set to allow flakes to be broken off it, or in this case, these hammer stones just spore huge flakes of volcanic tuff away from it. Also, you can get a good view here, as you'll see when you come and look at the box, the bits, sorry, artifacts, at the back there, axes. You'll see there's a particular colour to the stone, which is extraordinarily recognisable. And many of you will know it. It's when you've got a flake of it and you break it against the stone, you can cut paper, card, anything with it. It's extraordinarily sharp. Right, so the thing right up to date. Very few archaeologists were bold enough to try and do anything about excavating some of these sites. Saturn, Clare, Fell, and Brian went there. But a couple of guys, Professor Richard Bradley, and Professor Mark Edmonds, went up in the 1990s, based themselves conveniently at the old Dungeon Gill. And no doubt had a few interesting chats with climbers bar there. But they actually excavated some of these sites on the mountain. Which is phenomenal thinking about it, because logistically it's a huge challenge. But in their book, Interpreting the Axe Trade, they were very reluctant to actually give any calibrated radiocarbon dates. Do you understand radiocarbon dating? First of all, well, roughly you can date organic samples by determining the decay of a carbon isotope. That's it in a nutshell. So it's a long-established technique. It's not rocket science. Everybody does it in archaeology, and it's true, tried and respected. But Bradley and Edmonds were not confident enough to ascribe dates to a lot of their sites at this time. I often wondered why this was. I looked at this book in the garden at my home yesterday, trying to work out why they didn't actually want to say it. But Stephen Shenton and a whole bunch of people published in Radiocarbon, which is the industry standard publication for dating, in 2020, and they calibrated the dates, and they slammed the dates of the mining activity, the quarry activity in Great Langdale to that period, 4,000 to 3,700 BC, which is 6,000, 5,000 years ago, something like that. Anyway, which is really early. Stonehenge was first created in around 2,900 BC. So this is long before that happened. How much waste is up there in the mountains from this activity? Well, I did this rough graph based on a survey that Philip Ferris and Jamie Quartermain did and published in the Proceedings of the Prehistoric Society in 1989. This just gives you a rough idea of the amount of we call it debitage, this waste product. So there's nearly 12,000 square meters, and that's just what you see on the surface in South Spring. Gullies and Loch Crag, there's about 1,350. House at Stickel's got nearly 2,000 square meters. Seathwaite Fell, which is right over towards Borrowdale, 635. Obviously not as popular. Stillbrook Pike, as I mentioned before, nearly 3,300 square meters of just surface remains. That doesn't account for the depth. It's just what's visible on the surface. So there's thousands and thousands of tons of debitage. There are around 29 axe blade stone sources known in the UK. This is the Central Fells is by far the largest of any of these stone sources. What do these things actually look like once they've been roughed out and polished and so forth? Well, this is a really good example. I'm sorry, I don't know where I got this photograph, but it came on Facebook. This is from the region near Hull. And this one is well over a foot long, and it's almost perfect. It's got a slight chip on the top, actually, so they might have to take it back. Langdale is there, and all the little triangles on the map. This is quite an old map. I think it's from Professor Mark Evans' work. Little triangles show where they got to, and those are the ones that we know about through archaeological excavation and chance finds and the rest of it. There would be many, many more. And for example, the Northern Ireland doesn't get much of a look at on this map, but we know lots of them went over to Ireland, the whole of Ireland. Also, it's not on the map, but they also found a way to automate it as well. Not, as far as I'm aware, I might be correct on this, not to Neolithic, although several people seem to think that they did, but on Europe and its own industries. We're not going to get into that after this afternoon for obvious reasons. Right, so I've given you a cut tour of the kind of background to all of this stuff. So this is an internationally important industry at a time where industries in inverted commas never really existed. So it's like more like production or creation is a word I prefer to use. Because we're not talking about some kind of Victorian factory system where people went up there and worked by rote according to what people were telling them to do, and then knocked off at 5 o'clock and went back home again. This is something that they were motivated to do for various reasons, and that's something else that we come back to. So, Upper Esther, pretty mega scenery to do your work in. The axe tough band cuts across the slope from the plateau below south summit of Scorpel Pike, which is behind that little badge there, and it cuts across this wonderful rock tor called Pen. You can almost see it there, and then disappears down across Little Narrow Cove and cuts across Esk Pike and leading to Bowfell. Esk Pike, there's a few flaking sites on. Bowfell has absolutely none. I'll come back to these places later on if you remind me. I might forget. Summit of Scorpel Pike, so you all know what that looks like. But if you go there at certain times of the day, you can see the quarry pits. This is one of them, where on the South Plateau, where stone was found. And they had to literally dig through the block field, which is this stuff, to get down to the quality of the axe stuff that was below it. So not only did they go there without the benefits of modern technology and clothing and all the rest of it, but they had to excavate to get to the stone, mine the stone, and bring it away again. And that's just an example of one of the runnels in the block field where you can actually see, if you can make it out, the bluer stones visible here next to the meter ranging pole there, or below it, sorry, are all flakes from stone axe creation. And I would want to emphasize this, and I'm sure a lot of you will know this already, but it's worth repeating. A lot of people treat the Lake District nowadays as if it's so well known that it's almost blasé to go wild swimming and camping there, and isn't it all wild and wonderful, and you know, what a great place, etc. We have to try and forget about modern conceptions of what places like the lakes and its mountains are for us now, and we have to remember what people in the past would have thought when they went into these places. And a number of anthropological studies have emphasized the fact that mountains were sacred. They were special places where people do not normally go. To go there required almost a spiritual recognition of this fact, so that the people going to create these blades were in a relationship with mountains that we very rarely can understand nowadays. It was like a spiritual or a religious condition that you had to enter into to gain permission to access those places. So this was my study area. From Slightside, Scorpel, Great End, Esk Pike, Bowfell, and Fleet Banks, for a long scale. And it was this central tongue of land between the River Esk and the Lincoln Beck where I was concentrating my study efforts at that time. And Spring Cairn, there are a number of different cairns that I found. Spring Cairn was one of the first ones. And this is a natural feature with a whopping great megalith stuck in the middle of it. And this is just the plan of it. There's a spring coming out from underneath it. But at the top end of it, there was a tiny square structure with a purple green slab of stone, volcanic plastic sandstone, I've been told it is, not volcanic toe, sticking out next to the cairn. And this stone had grooves on it. So I went up one night and took a picture of it. So you can see them quite clearly there. And a lot of people would think, well, it's natural, like glaciers, with that. Well, I don't think so. So I had a close look at it. And I kind of planned it out so that there actually is a sequence of activity on this stone. So the basic bottom of it is that. There's a whole bunch of triangles on the other side of it there, in relation to the central groove. And then there's lots of other pretty things I can do with it. But you get the general idea, don't you? There's a kind of sequence of activity here, but which is not natural. And I figured this was something we call in prehistory a polissoir, which is a stone where tools were finished. Stone tools were finished on it. Anything from an axe blade to an arrowhead, you can use the kind of carborundum qualities of this particular stone to sharpen your tools. And that's what this is. It's like prehistoric doodles, basically. Nothing much more than that. So that's that side, and that's of the publication of it as its plan. This time, unfortunately, not in full technical. But there are also two other cairns up there: Lowgate Craig's Cairn and Scarlane Cairn. Again, on this massive tongue of land running down from Esquimalt towards the confluence of the Esk and the Lincoln. And to most intents and purposes, this looks like it's an entirely natural feature, as various people have pointed out to me. But it isn't. This is let's go back one, Lowgate's Crag Cairn, which is sat under a crag on this tongue of land right next to it. But basically, it's a spitting image of the log, what in southern England you call long cairn, a burial cairn, with chambers in it. Which you can still make out, some of which have been robbed, like the one at the northern end of it, just there. But again, as with Long Crag Spring Cairn, it has a massive, artificially sited monolith, which is right there, sat on the cairn, chopped up on the cairn. You can see it next to the raging pole there. The raging pole's about 2 meters. And then there was this. This cairn is still is bugging me because it's such an unusual thing anywhere, really. This is a photogrammetric plan of it, and it's tiny. But to give you a sense of where, I'll show you where it is in a second, actually, so I'll show up for a second and get on with it. But the cairn itself is just there. It's only about maybe 4 by 6 meters, but it has a facade of boulders, and they alternate from this boulder, which is an orange colour, to a white volcanic boulder, to an orange, to a white, to an orange, to a white. People say, glacier. No, glaciers don't put boulders alternately in facades like that. This is an artificial creation. And there it is with the Pike, so Pike, Bill Crag in the background. So that's the cairn, and there you go, orange, white, orange, white, orange, white, orange. And behind it, there are the remains of, it's unexcavated. It's unlikely to be excavated, given it's at the heart of the World Heritage Site in one of the remotest places. But there's some kind of burial in at the back of it. And one of these stones, that one, had markings on it. I was sitting there having my lunch next to it before I realised what this was, and this big bumblebee came flying over. Not making it up. And it sat on my rucksack, and I looked down at the rucksack and I looked at the stone, and I saw these marks. And anyway, my mate, Aaron Watson, who's an ace doing 3D photogrammetry, spent an afternoon with me doing a 3D perspective of this stone. And you can see here marks, a bit more close up. That's the Aaron. And you can also make out the banded nature of this volcanic rock here. And that's my picture of it, and I've colorized it. Now, this is really my interpretation of the marks, though. These marks, I'm told by all the geologists I've chatted to, are entirely natural, so I'm quite happy with that. But what's interesting to me is why it's on the facade would have been selected deliberately to indicate something on this cairn. This cairn is not like any other cairn that I've seen anywhere in the lakes. It's entirely unusual. It could even be pre-Neolithic or Mesolithic or Paleolithic for that. So we don't know at the moment. Anyway. Now, the other unusual thing about Upper Eskdale is that in relation to what happens with the heavens above it, it's extremely interestingly orientated, as is Scawfell's Pike South Plateau. So the sun and the moon rise over to the west of it, and then they set over towards the east of it there. The whole amplitude, so it's like an enormous kind of lunar and solar observatory. And these cairn sites that I was finding and getting recorded were down at the bottom end of the ridge here, near Lowgate Crags and Highgate Crags. And if you go there, I'm sure you know it, there are huge rock platforms where you can stand and look at the mountains all around you and get a perspective of what's going on. Not just with the mountains and views, but how to get in and out of those places. There are certain access routes that are indicated with these arrows on that thing. But also, if you're interested in what's happening in terms of what's happening with the moon and the sun, it's a good observatory. But the only problem is, it's all very well been saying that, but it's nothing like there's a kind of stone circle or anything like that to give you an actual piece of evidence that might say in prehistory people went up there and did this kind of thing like they do with Stonehenge, but by the way, it's in one of the flattest parts of the country I can ever imagine anybody doing anything. Come back to that later. So there's nothing there really, apart from these cairns where these are kind of burial sites, but we haven't done any dates for it. So this is where things got to in 2018 when I went to Valcamonica and told them about what they were doing. And just to show that this is actually happening, because people seem to need evidence of these kind of things. This is the sun setting over, I think that's Long Green, Scawfell, Slightside, and Scawfell Pike, from this mountain sanctuary back in June, near midsummer 2019, that picture was taken. So the thing stopped then. I think I did enough in the mountains, so I came away and had a look at some satellite photographs instead for about 2 years, looking at a whole bunch of radar ritual sites on the southwest tip of Cumberland, which turned up just because I started getting interested in the West Coast at that point, because really of the fact that Swinside, which is one of the finest stone circles in the country, is there, but also the coastal plain has a reputation for there having been sites there that were destroyed in the 19th century in the course of agricultural improvement. So the next part of the story of this saga really is to do with these satellite photographs, courtesy of Google Earth, God bless them, and what these imply. Now this is a site called New Buildings, which is get this right, it's just about here on that. You can't see anything on the ground now when you go there, but you might be able to see on this picture there's lots of little dots. These are all cows. And if I just, there is actually a huge enclosure visible here as well. If you doubt that, I'll just put some arrows there to give you an idea where it is. This enclosure is enormous. It's about 150, 200 meters across. And in 2018, a guy called Anthony Murphy was flying a drone over the Boyne Valley in Ireland, where some of the best examples of Neolithic passage grave art are on Earth. And he spotted things in the crops there, and he wrote a book about it, his finds, which went viral international, but he found huge monuments that were not visible on the grass on the surface because the dry summer kicked up in 2018, as it did here for me. The indications of these thousands and thousands of year-old sites that had gone. And for those who don't know crop marks, if there are ditches and pits and things like that, the crop grows dark, richer and darker than it would around them. So that's why these things pop up to us. So that is one of Anthony's sites. And that's something. They're almost exactly the same. But I showed this to some Irish archaeologists, and they said, "Wow, you've got to come over and talk to us about this." An invitation I haven't taken up yet because things have moved on a bit. But there are also the sites of prehistoric monuments that were timber post erected in ditched areas like this one, which is a reconstruction of what they call them henges in some cases. This is one at Mailman or Millfield in Northumbria. To give you an idea of what they look like, this is a small example, they've got a lot bigger than this. And this is a site near Millen. You can make out, again in 2018, a huge circular enclosure with lots of little pits inside it, with a couple of lines here, which are not full of drainage, they're parts of a specific boundary area for this site, which there's transcription showing the pits inside this circular structure with these boundary ditches. Well, it's some of it. It's probably about 80 to 90 metres across. But I'd just like to emphasise it's remarkably similar to the first phase of Stonehenge, this site. It's got similar kind of set of projections at the top end of it. It's got similar entrances at the top end of it. It's got similar entrances at the bottom end of it. People often think of Stonehenge and they just think of it as the stones. Well, forget it, because the earlier phases of Stonehenge were all to do with the building of the earthworks before they brought stone 180 kilometres from West Wales to put in holes. And one of my favourite sites, which will never be excavated because they get very annoyed about it, is under the pitch at the rugby club in Milton. You can see part of the bank of it just there. That's the rugby club. That's the rugby club headquarters. I haven't then told them anything about this yet, in case they get very irate. So there's basically the southwest of Cumbria is stuffed full of ritual monuments, some of which date back to probably the time of Stonehenge, and some of them were related to what was happening in Ireland at the time. So I was thinking, well, what's going on over here? Why were people building Irish-type monuments and Stonehenge-type monuments in a rather remote park here at the town? And then I thought, well, come on. There's one thing that people wanted in the Lake District that they went to considerable efforts to get. And that's why they were building these sites. They were coming here because of the Stonehenge blade creation sites. And it's highly likely that Swinside was part of that, this remarkable site. Looking, it's a clear day, so you can just see the mountains that are called like this in the background there. And this at Castlereagh, as you all know, and Cumbria's got some of the finest stones in the country. Why were all these sites created? Well, I think the answer is pretty straightforward, really. It's just, as I said, the ritual sites down in the southwest. These sites were there because of the acting history, not for any other reason. Which brings me back, finally, thinking, oh, thank God, to Orlando. There's a guy called Gabriel Blamires, who isn't an archaeologist, but he's a historian. And following the tradition of amateur English commerce archaeologists who are interested in the past, finding things that people like me don't tend to find, Gabriel Blamires wrote a wonderful book. You can still get it. I've got this on the internet, called Guidestones, the Great Landale Axe Factories, Ancient Ways to Stone Axe Working Sites in the English Lake District. What Gabriel did not include in his book, and I've just been corresponding with him about this to find out why, there's a site of a stone that he found near Side Pike. If you know the weekly footpath that goes up Side Pike from the National Trust campsite, the stone's quite close to that footpath as you head uphill. And it's on a lot of websites like the Modern Antiquarian, for example. But Gabriel explains why it didn't appear in the book. I suspect it probably because he found it later on, or he might have just thought it wasn't very important, as indeed many of the people have walked away from it. For those who don't know, the old Dungeon Bill is there. That's all you need to know. Next picture. So I went there and I looked at the stone and I started looking around this place. And one of the reasons that nobody's recognised what is there is because there's a lot there. Is because half of it is covered by trees, including the bit where the stone is. The other half of it just looks like rough grazing and pumican ground, cut with pole. There's nothing really particularly interesting. Let's go walking up to the Pike and Blisco and both on the step. But you can also get an inkling of what an amazing place this is in regard to the perspective from it. Because look, I've not got the 360-degree view here. You can see right up to the head of Mickledon and Ross at Pike, over to Bothwell, and just visible here, the axe working sites on Pike of Stickle, top buttress is there, Loft Crag and Harrison Stickle, the summit of which is just there. If the trees were not there, I think I've got a picture of it later on, showing a bit more of it. That entire fantastic pikes visible from the side, which is actually on the platform above the valley bottom. So I'm poodled around this site and I started to realise that there were some very unusual features about it, including clusters of boulders that didn't look like they were just there by their natural agency. And then I had a little look at this, and this is what is known as a recumbent. It weighs about 14 tons, and you can get an idea of the size of it just from the fact that it's got 2 meters of scale on it just there. Looking up to Pike and Blisco in the background. Sat on a bed of cobbles, and I know it's a recumbent because recumbents are features of stone circles that are only found in the UK, in North East Scotland. Recumbent stone circles. Now I didn't all realise this at once, but I'll show you. Hang on, this is good. This is copying of a stone circle in Aberdeenshire, photographed by Vicky Dunbar. So you get the idea, don't you? These are extraordinarily distinctive monuments. They always come like this. So once you find them, there can't be any other explanation for their being. So you get this massive block with usually quite a flat. It's a bit skinny, this one. So you get 2 very distinctive pillar stones set to either side of the recumbent. These are called flankers. Wonderful, isn't it? But entirely opposite. So that gives you an idea. This is a complete example that's been excavated. Tom Lavery, again, like a chest. The recumbent stone is there, and the 2 flankers are to either side of it. And you can see the remains of the rest of the circle, which is pretty well intact. On the hilltop, looking over towards the Cairns on this one, excavated by Richard Bradley. This is John Hill's photograph of it. So where are the flankers at this side Pike side? Well, one of them's fallen down, and it's still in the grass nearby the recumbent there. And the other one is in the wood just nearby. This one it looks very squat, but it's actually just about 1.9 meters, just like the other one is. Originally, this would have stood on the eastern side of that recumbent stone, and the other one would have been on the western side. So the flankers are still there. What does this monument look like in terms of what's actually visible on the ground now? Well, I'll show you some of the stones. Recumbent there, west flanker, east flanker. But another critical point in relation to all of these sites in the northeast of Scotland that always is there in relation to these monuments I've just described is there's always a cairn inside the circle, or cairns. And there's a monster cairn, heavily overgrown, just inside the circle arc there. And the other thing I neglected to point out, which I should have done, is that the recumbent and its flankers are uh, understood by most archaeologists to relate to observations related to the winter solstice, which is the key alignment that Stonehenge is centered on, not the summer solstice, the winter solstice. The other blue dots on this map are all these isolated boulders that have moved around. And the reason this site's not in good condition is that a lot of these stones were shifted. Some of them went into the creation of the dry stone wall that runs diagonally across the site. But the plan also shows you the location of Gabriel's stone, stone 1 there, which is just outside the stone to its north, and another stone that I found in the course of my studies. So this is just to kind of sum up what's going on, really. The Comfort Stone Circle sites, North East Scotland, Stonehenge, Vercelli, where a lot of the stone from the first phase of post-earthwork phase of Stonehenge came from, is there. The Boyne Valley, where the passage tombs are, is there. Cumbria is obviously here, and Callanish and Orkney I'll put on as well. Axial stone circles, which in southwest Ireland are kind of mini, they're mini Comfort Stone Circle sites. But nothing like as grand as the real thing, like in Scotland. Right, so what kind of dates are these things then? Well, the excavations that Richard Bradley conducted at Tom Levery show that it was used from the late Neolithic, 2500 BC, right up into the 1600s, AD 1600s, with cremation burials possibly in the middle of the site. So it's quite a long time slot there, but long after, as you can say to me, after I've finished speaking, long after the use of the stone from the high valles to the north of it, which is interesting. That's just the plan to show you where the stones are. And also, I should not neglect this, so I'm going to include it anyway, because everybody will say, well, what were the orientations like from this site? Well, if the trees weren't there, you can see all kinds of things, which are all quite interesting, really. So a midsummer sunrise from the site that I'm talking about occurs not over in Pikes, obviously. The Landale Pikes are here on this plan. That's Stickle Tarn. The midsummer sunrise occurs over one of the other Landale Pikes, Swinescale Pike and Leary, just there. Midwinter sunrise is right next door over side Pike itself. Midwinter sunset over Pike and Blisco, and midsummer sunset is right up Mickleby and incorporates the axe sites high on Pike of Stickling. So it couldn't be better as a kind of orientation place for lunar and solar events on the horizon around it. Right, so finally, we've come to the point which I'm going to find is the most intriguing from my perspective at the moment, and that is what Gabriel Stone has on it and what's on the stone that I found nearby. This is, I can't emphasize how unusual this stone is. Now, put it this way, there's a lot of so-called rock art in northern England and in Scotland that has various forms of circles and spirals inside on stone. There's probably thousands of examples all over the landscape of rock art crops and isolated rocks and so forth. But this is on a boulder, and the boulder's quite odd. It weighs about 4 metric tons, so it was not, 4 metric tons. So it would not have been easy to shift it around. But it's angled, it's facing in a particular direction. Anybody like to guess which direction it's facing? Go for it. Like a sniffle. Yeah, I'm landing on Pikes. A bit close up, you can see some of the marks, the little cut marks visible on that there. This is not being focused properly, but you get a general idea. there's a whole host of cut marks. And these are engraved, not using metal tools, I think, in this instance, onto the surface of volcanic stone, which is incredibly hard. So you can imagine how much labour went into the person. This photo from the Antiquarian's website, if you want to take a closer look for yourself. So you can see it's angled here. It's sun's catching it quite nicely. So we're looking from part of the stone circle towards the outer bank of the stone circle. And if the trees weren't there, the rest of the Langdale Valley would be in the background there. But the stone is, as this gentleman has just pointed out, is angled the other way towards the cliffs. That's just a demonstration to show that the pikes of this behind the trees here. And that is where the stone comes. Now, there's lots of ways of recording rock art. My friend Aaron, as you've seen, uses a camera and takes thousands of pictures and then stitches them all together with a software program that produces an image of the rock, as you've seen already. In Archaeological, which is where I went to that conference in Italy, they get the community involved in rock art because there are sheets and sheets of stone in the Baltimore Valley covered in images. So has anybody been there at all? It's in the Italian Alps. If you get a chance, go because it's astonishing. It's got the entire prehistory of the valley, fields, landscapes, cattle, people. They're all mapped out on the rocks of the valley. And there, to use photogrammetry, you could do it, but it would take an awful long time. And it also doesn't get you in touch with the rock very easily. So they run summer schools at Archaeological. All they do is they go and put big sheets of plastic out on the rock, and they draw it, trace it out. Sorry, they didn't capture any of that. So you can see this is one of the summer schools in practice. So that's what I did. It gave me a stone. And this is an early stage of the recording of the cut marks on it, which apparently nobody had done before. Although I was prepared to be still corrected on that one. And it turns out that there are 35 of these markings on this rock, and some of them are much, much more deeply indented. These three marks, for example, than others. Some are larger than others, some are smaller, all the rest of it. And when you map them all out, this is my transcription after all that effort with the plastic. It boils down to this. So we're not looking at the stone now, we're just looking at what's up the images that are actually on it. So it turns out that there's one there's one very deeply indented mark in particular, which has a hollow around it, which is indicated by the dotted lines on the western side of the stone. And it seemed to me, and still does, that that was very significant because of the orientation of the side that I've indicated to you already. I'm bearing in mind that the line of the pikes are just to the north of it here, so north indicator. So you can imagine the pikes up at the top of the slide, and then you're basically looking over toward the crinkles and Bowfell if you're standing on this side of the stone. And that's the other thing about this stone, just to go back to it for a second, it's like this lectern, you can walk around it and look at it from different perspectives. Might not be able to read it very easily, what you put there, but you angle it that way. Do that with your images. So that's what I think was going on here. And these are the most deeply indented cut marks on this stone. So there's that there, that one which I indicated, and then there's three others, and the others are much less obvious. And I think what this represents is a group of asterisms. Now, these are not constellations, as we understand it, because astronomers, most modern astronomers would not regard this as a serious depiction of any part of the cosmos whatsoever. But asterisms are cultural interpretations of parts of the night sky. So they don't have to be a one-to-one accurate depiction of every single star. It's what they appear like to the culture that's creating them, whether that's on paper, cloth, or in this case, on rock. So these are the groups of asterisms that I think are indicated on the stone. I've colorized it for ease of reference. There's one here, there's one in relation to that deep mark there, there's one here in relation to that deep mark there, and there's one here in relation to that deep mark there. And I think the westernmost mark is a moon indicator. I don't think it's connected with the sun. I think it is connected with the moon. And what we're looking at, I think, is intimately related to the Rhino Pikes. And there are three. I'll just read you one. Well, you might find this interesting, or you might not. But what Wainwright says in his chapter on Loft Crag in Central Files Book 3 is entirely relevant here. The Langdale Pikes are variously regarded as being from 2 to 5 in number. Thorn Crag and Paviar, often included in accounts, have not the distinctive outline of the others, and should perhaps more properly be omitted. But Loft Crag most certainly has a qualifying characteristic. It lies between Pikersdale and Harrison Sickle, but south of it, having a small, abrupt summit. So there are 3 Langdale Pikes according to the master, and there are 3 deep cut marks on this rock that relate to those summits. Each of those summits has Neolithic axe working sites on it. Now, asterisms, what kind of clusters could be represented on this? Well, the stars aren't a fixed thing in the sky. Well, let's say nothing is really. But if you ever do this at night, if you go and sit on a mountain and look at the stars, you see this kind of activity. This is obviously Mike will know this particularly well. You can see the stars move in star trails. This is Brigham Rocks, I think, in Yorkshire. Sorry, I don't have a source for this, but I think it's a wonderful perspective. It gives you an idea of what kind of things were happening above, which don't relate really to the moon or the sun, but have an energy all of their own. So they shift and trail around. So that's the first thing that people would have been looking at. But I think the asterisms that are visible on this stone relate to a particular, it's not a constellation, but it's a star cluster called M45, which is the Pleiades. And the Pleiades have got a big track record in ancient cultures all the way across the earth. This is obviously probably a Hubble Space Telescope picture of them. And in this image, there's upwards of I think there's over 1,000 stars. Yes. But only 6 or 7 of them are visible to the naked eye. Known as the Seven Sisters in some pictures, 444 light years from Earth, situated in the constellation Taurus. The origin of the name comes from ancient Greek to sail. They mark the sailing season in the Mediterranean. Hawaiian temples were orientated on their rising to regulate the calendar, and their appearance cross-reference with that of the moon indicates the right dates in sowing and harvesting the crops. In ancient Mesopotamia, priests used to keep their lunar year synchronized with the solar year using the moon in conjunction with the Pleiades. And in archaeological circles, the most spectacular example of the Pleiades on an ancient artifact and the oldest depiction of any part of the cosmos that we know about is the Nebra sky disk in Germany, buried about 1600 BC. And the story of the discovery of this and the tale that went behind its eventual encapsulation in the glass case in the museum is well worth your attention. This was found by a metal detector illegally, and in a sting operation in Switzerland, a museum curator got arrested with the metal detectorists just by the police to show, paid a deal for it so we could acquire it in the museum. It's remarkable. So there's a big dent in it at the top. It's only about maybe about the size of the dinner plate. It weighs about 5 kilograms. It's bronze, but the sheet gold on it is from Cornwall. And here I've indicated this. Most archaeologists and archaeoastronomers accept that that is a depiction of Pleiades on these things. There's also probably a full moon and crescent moons on it, as well as about 32 other stars. So, my take on this stone is that it's a unique example of a set of asterisms, and it probably predates this that I've just shown you. And I did promise you a picture of the Pikes in all their glory from this stone circle site related to the stone, and there they are. Now, I just want to round this up because I know we're probably getting. We're okay for time.
A little bit longer. Just talk for a little bit longer.
Little bit longer.
Please.
There are other things I haven't mentioned very much about the Cairns at Cocktail. I know you should be asking me about those, but I just wanted to say that it's understood that the midsummer sun sets from Cocktail look like place and stick on the background now. It's a very good picture of the midsummer, but to get the idea. And the panels, there are several panels written up there, but a lot of people have said to me they look like a map of London. If you ever see, you can see why. Now, I'm not going to show any images of them at the moment. You can go there or you can look yourself and make carvings out. But is that me or you?
Sorry, that's me. Carry on.
Okay, of course. I was going to say that there isn't just all the fusion panel of art. By the way, it is ancient because it was excavated, part of it was excavated in 2019. I think it was so they found that the carvings continued below the ground surface, so it wasn't created by some people think by somebody in the 1940s. The panels continue around to the other side of the stone wall where the star used to be. So it's like a sequence of activity. But there's definitely indications on this map, in inverted commas, that the Pikes form part of that picture, and there are 3 of them, not just 5. And if we also look from the observation sites that I indicated in Upper Eskdale, looking to the mountains there are where the axe stone came from, the highest part of the Scorefall Massif on Scorefall Pike, or carved in the Pike. That is a very distinctive form, which is very similar to that of the Langdale Pikes in terms of the number and the nature, the atmosphere, the environment of the place. So these are very similar. And there are other examples of megalithic art, like this, which is the winter solstice marking stone K1 at New Grange in the Boyne Valley in Ireland, where groups of 3 occur. Groups of 3 rock art carvings here visible most clearly on this part of this enormous and splendid stone. And there are other examples of 3s, like this, the Stonehenge trilaterals, the 3 stones, that's why it's called a trilateral. So 3 had a significance in history. And as I said before, it's not all about the numbers, and it's not all about getting an exact alignment on something or an exact appearance of something that's in the sky put down on paper. It's about the nature of the place and the power of the place that gave people in the past the motivation to want to go there, to risk their lives, to go and create these remarkable artifacts that went out all over the UK, Ireland, and perhaps beyond. So I'd just like to thank these guys who helped me on my journey, and thank you all very much for listening. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask them.